The sand tasted like copper and shame. I was face down in the Arizona dirt when I heard her boots stop beside my head. Through the ringing in my ears and the instructors screaming, I could make out the outline of her figure against the white-hot sun, small, compact, perfectly still, while the rest of us were sprawled across the obstacle course like broken toys. "Candidate Reeves is still standing." Sergeant Kovac's voice cut through the 100-degree heat. "The rest of you sorry excuses can't even make it through day 3 without collapsing." I pushed myself up, spitting dust, and that's when I made the mistake. I laughed, not loud, just a short, dismissive exhale that said everything I was thinking. Her? She's 90 pounds soaking wet. She'll be gone by week 2. She turned her head, just slightly. Our eyes met for maybe 2 seconds, and I saw something there that should have warned me. But I was 24, 6'2", former college linebacker with a chip on my shoulder and a family legacy to uphold. My grandfather had commanded a tank battalion in Korea. My father had served in the First Gulf War. I'd grown up on bases from Fort Hood to Fort Bragg, and I knew exactly what belonged in an M1 Abrams crew. Sarah Reeves, all 5'4" of her, wasn't it? Fort Huachuca sprawled across southeastern Arizona like a monument to military endurance, 50,000 acres of desert, mountains, and the kind of heat that made you question every decision that led you there. The Armor School training program was 8 months of technical education, physical conditioning and psychological warfare designed to produce tank crews that could function as a single organism under fire. We were 3 weeks in, and the attrition rate was already brutal. Our barracks held 24 candidates when we started. We were down to 19. The bunks were arranged in 2 rows, and Sarah's was at the far end, always perfectly made with hospital corners, while the rest of us barely managed to pull our sheets tight. She didn't socialize much, didn't go to the PX for beer on Sunday afternoons, didn't join the poker games or the complaining sessions about Kovac's impossible standards. She just worked. "She's fucking weird," my bunkmate Rodriguez said one night, shuffling cards on his footlocker. "Doesn't talk to anyone, just sits there reading technical manuals like it's a novel." "Trying too hard," I said, not looking up from my phone. "Overcompensating." "For what?" I shrugged. "Being a diversity checkbox." Rodriguez, whose family had been in the army for 3 generations and who spoke better Spanish than English, raised an eyebrow at me. "That's a shit take, Marcus." "Is it?" "How many female tank commanders you know?" "How many did I know before last year?" "0, because they literally weren't allowed in armor units until 2016. He dealt the cards with sharp, precise movements. "World changes, man. We change with it, or get left behind." I didn't answer. I was thinking about my father's reaction when I told him there was a woman in my training unit. The long pause on the phone. The careful, measured words about different standards and physical requirements, and how some things just are what they are. The next morning, we had our first session in the gunnery simulator. A massive room filled with mock tank turrets connected to computer systems that could simulate everything from target acquisition to catastrophic equipment failure. This was where you learned whether you had the split-second decision-making and technical precision to actually hit anything with a 120mm smoothbore cannon. I was paired with Thompson, a quiet kid from Iowa who could field strip an M240 machine gun blindfolded but got nervous under pressure. Sarah was paired with Kovac himself, which seemed designed to break her. Candidate Reeves, Kovac's voice crackled through the simulator speakers. "Target, enemy T-72, 11 o'clock, moving left to right, range 1,800 meters. Wind speed 12 knots from the west. You have 8 seconds. Through the observation window, I watched her hands move across the controls. No hesitation, no second-guessing. Her voice came through calm and clear. "Gunner, Sabot, tank. Identified." Kovac responded, playing the role of gunner. "Fire." The simulator registered a hit, center mass, textbook perfect. Kovac didn't congratulate her. He just fed in another scenario, then another, then another. For 45 minutes he threw every possible variable at her. Moving targets, obscured targets, targets in urban environments where civilian structures complicated the shot. She hit 87%. I hit 62%. The highest score in our class before that day had been 71%. In the locker room after, I overheard Dawkins, a loudmouth from Georgia who'd already been recycled once for failing land navigation, talking to a group of guys near the showers. "It's rigged," he was saying. "They're giving her easier scenarios. Got to justify the political bullshit." "You watched the same test I did?" Rodriguez asked. "She was running the advanced urban module. That's what they give to guys going for armored reconnaissance." "Whatever, man. It's not about the test. It's about reality. When we're downrange and shit gets real, you think she's going to be able to haul a wounded crew member out of a burning tank. You think she's got the upper body strength to swap out a track under fire." I should have said something. Should have pointed out that Sarah had maxed the physical fitness test 2 weeks running, that she'd carried the same ruck weight as everyone else on the 20-mile march, that the modern M1A2 SEP V3 was so technologically advanced that raw physical strength mattered less than it had in my grandfather's day. Instead, I grabbed my towel and headed for the shower, letting the conversation continue behind me. That night, I found myself in the common area around 2300 hours, unable to sleep. Sarah was there, sitting alone at one of the tables with a laptop open and a stack of technical manuals beside her. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere in the distance I could hear the sound of helicopters conducting night operations. She looked up when I entered, her expression neutral. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Something like that." I moved to the coffee maker, which held a pot of something that had been there since probably 1400 hours. "You study all night, every night?" "Not all night." She closed the laptop, "just trying to stay ahead." "You're already ahead. You put up numbers today that some people won't hit by graduation." "Some people aren't starting from where I'm starting from." I poured the coffee, which had the consistency of motor oil. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I have to be twice as good to be considered half as competent." She said it without emotion, like she was stating a mechanical fact. "You laughed at me today, on the obstacle course." I felt something tighten in my chest. It's fine, I'm used to it." She opened the laptop again, eyes back on the screen. "But for the record, I wasn't standing there because I'm naturally gifted at heat endurance. I was standing there because I've been running in full gear in 100-degree weather since June. I started training for this 6 months before the program began. While you were probably enjoying your last summer before service, I was doing everything I could to make sure I wouldn't be the weak link. That's not... Do you know what the washout rate is for women in armor training?" She didn't wait for me to answer. 47%. You know what it is for men? 31%. And do you know why that gap exists? It's not because we can't do the job. It's because we show up already, being told we can't do the job, and half the people around us are waiting for us to fail to prove their assumptions right. I set down the coffee cup. I wasn't... Yes, you were. She finally looked at me again, and this time there was something harder in her expression. "And that's okay. I don't need you to believe in me. I just need you to stay out of my way." She gathered her materials and left, leaving me alone with the humming lights and the bitter coffee, and the uncomfortable realization that I might be exactly the kind of person I'd always told myself I wasn't. The following week, we started crew integration training, learning to function as a 4-person unit inside the claustrophobic interior of an actual M1A2. The roles were commander, gunner, loader, and driver. Kovac rotated us through different positions and different crews, forcing us to learn every job and work with every personality. Thursday afternoon, I found myself assigned as gunner in a crew with Sarah as commander. The M1A2 interior is a strange kind of intimate. You're sealed in a metal box with 3 other people, breathing recycled air, communicating through headsets. Every movement coordinated because there's no room for independence. The commander sits in the turret with the best view of the battlefield. The gunner sits below and to the right, eyes on the targeting systems. The loader is to the left, responsible for feeding rounds into the cannon. The driver is isolated in the hull, steering based on the commander's directions. Sarah's voice came through my headset, professional and precise. "Gunner, traverse right, scan Sector 3. I moved the controls, bringing the main gun around. The targeting computer painted the landscape in greens and greys. "Stop," she said. "Target, technical vehicle 2 o'clock, range 900 meters. I acquired the target. Identified. "Can you get a clean shot without hitting the building behind it?" I adjusted the aim, calculating angles. "Negative. Penetration would compromise the structure. Civilian risk." "Agreed. Driver, move us 40 meters left. Gunner, maintain target track." The tank shifted beneath us, the building cleared from the background. "Gunner, Sabot technical. Identified. Fire." I squeezed the trigger. The simulator registered the hit. "Good shot," she said, and moved immediately to the next scenario. We ran drills for 3 hours. By the end, my respect for her had grown considerably, not because she was good despite being a woman, but because she was simply good. Her command decisions were fast and sound. She knew the technical specifications of every weapon system. She could calculate firing solutions faster than anyone I'd trained with. When we climbed out of the simulator, drenched in sweat and stinking of stress and electronics, Kovac was waiting. "Reeves, Marcus, good work today." He consulted his tablet. "You two are one of 3 crews currently tracking for Armor Officer Basic. Keep it up." As we walked back toward the barracks, I finally said what I should have said a week ago. "I'm sorry for laughing at you, for assuming things." She didn't stop walking. "Apology noted. I mean it. I was wrong." "You were," she glanced at me, "but you're not the first, and you won't be the last. The question is whether you stay wrong or whether you learn. I'm trying to learn. Then actually see me as a soldier. Not as a woman trying to be a soldier, just a soldier." We walked in silence for a moment, the desert sunset painting the mountains pink and gold. "Deal," I said. She nodded once and something shifted between us. Not friendship exactly, but the beginning of the kind of mutual respect that makes a crew function when everything goes to hell. What I didn't know then, walking back through that Arizona sunset, was that 5 months later, everything would go to hell in ways none of us trained for. And the tank we abandoned would be the only thing standing between us and a mistake that cost lives. Graduation from armor school came in March, with families packed into bleachers and the kind of ceremonial precision the Army does better than anyone. My father showed up in his Class A uniform, even though he'd been retired for 6 years. My mother cried. My younger sister asked too many questions about what came next. What came next was assignment to the 3rd Armored Brigade Combat Team, 1st Cavalry Division, stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. Sarah and I both got orders to the same unit, Charlie Company, different platoons. We celebrated that night with the rest of the graduates at a bar in Sierra Vista, drinking cheap beer and telling stories that were already becoming mythology. Rodriguez was heading to Germany. Thompson got Fort Riley. Dawkins had washed out during gunnery qualification and was being reassigned to logistics. "To surviving Kovac," someone toasted. "To not becoming tank mechanics," someone else added. Sarah sat at the end of the table, quieter than usual. When I caught her eye, she raised her glass slightly, a small acknowledgement of the distance we'd traveled from that first day in the dirt. Fort Hood sprawled across central Texas like a small city. 218,000 acres, 40 Sunzulun soldiers, enough firepower to invade a small country. The heat was different from Arizona. Humid, oppressive, the kind that made your uniform stick to your skin and never quite dry. The base had its own rhythms, its own culture, its own complicated history of pride and scandal. Charlie Company was housed in a series of concrete buildings near the motor pool, where dozens of M1A2 tanks sat in precise rows like sleeping giants. Our company commander was Captain Michel Torres, a 15-year veteran who'd done 3 combat deployments and had exactly 0 patience for bullshit. Our platoon leader was Lieutenant Harrison, fresh from West Point, eager and competent, but still learning how to lead soldiers who knew more than he did. I was assigned as gunner in 2nd Platoon, tank call sign War Dog 2-1. My commander was Staff Sergeant Kevin Chen, a sardonic 29-year-old from Sacramento who could fix anything mechanical and who ran the crew with casual efficiency. Our loader was Specialist Marcus Washington. We shared a first name, which got confusing, so everyone called him Wash. Our driver was Private First Class Tyler Moore, 19 years old, from rural Montana, who could coax the 70-ton beast through terrain that shouldn't have been possible. Sarah was assigned to 3rd Platoon as a gunner, working under Sergeant First Class William Garrett, a hard-nosed tanker from Louisiana who'd served in Iraq during the surge. The first 3 months were integration and training, learning the quirks of our specific vehicles, building crew cohesion, running endless gunnery drills at local ranges. The M1A2 SEP-V3 was a technological marvel, over $1 million in upgrades from the original model, with thermal imaging systems, advanced armor, digital networking that let us share targeting data across the entire company in real time. It was also temperamental as hell. War Dog 2-1, this is War Dog 6. Captain Torres's voice came through the radio one afternoon during field exercises. I'm showing your thermal sight degraded. Confirm. Chen checked the display. Confirmed, 6. Running diagnostics. Get it fixed. We're running the assault drill in 20 minutes, and I need all guns operational. I was already out of my seat, climbing into the August heat to access the external sensor panel. This was the reality of tank operations that the simulators never quite captured. The constant maintenance, the troubleshooting, the reality that you were operating machines that cost $8 million but still broke down like any other piece of equipment. Wash climbed up beside me. Think it's the calibration again? Probably. This system's been glitchy since we drew this tank. I pulled the panel cover. Hand me the multimeter. While I worked, I could see 3rd Platoon's tanks maneuvering about 400 meters away. Sarah's tank, War Dog 3-2, was executing a tactical bound, moving from one covered position to another with the kind of precision that came from endless practice. She's good, Wash observed, following my gaze. Yeah. Garrett's crew is tracking to win company gunnery this quarter. Heard she's a big part of that. I didn't respond, focused on the sensor array. The issue was a loose connection. Simple fix, but it would keep happening until someone tore the whole system down and rebuilt it properly. I made a note to talk to the maintenance team. By the time I got the system operational, we'd missed the assault drill. Chen wasn't happy, but he directed his frustration at the equipment, not me. That was one thing I appreciated about him. He understood the difference between crew failure and material failure. That evening I found Sarah in the motor pool doing her own maintenance. She was elbow-deep in the turret mechanism of 3-2, covered in grease, hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Thermal sight?" I asked. She looked up, startled. "How'd you know?" "We had the same issue today. It's the connection at the external junction. Quick fix, but it'll keep happening." "Yeah, I figured." She wiped her hands on a rag. "Garrett wants me to submit a maintenance request for a full system replacement, but that'll take weeks. I'm trying to jerry-rig something more permanent." I climbed up to look at her work. She'd actually improved on the standard fix, adding a secondary securing mechanism. That's smart. Learned it from my dad. He was a diesel mechanic. Civilian, but same principle. Make it work with what you have. You don't talk about your family much. She shrugged. Not much to tell. Dad's retired. Lives in Pennsylvania. Mum passed when I was 12. Little brother's in college. She returned to her work. What about you? Your father was at graduation. 28 years. Retired as a major. He's complicated about me being here. Complicated how? Proud but skeptical. He thinks the army's going soft, lowering standards, sacrificing readiness for politics. I heard myself echoing his words and felt uncomfortable with how easily they came. He's from a different generation. So was my dad, Sarah said quietly. And you know what he told me when I said I wanted to do this? He said the military would try to break me, and then the men in my unit would try to break me, and then the actual job would try to break me. And if I survived all that, I'd be twice the soldier anyone else was. She looked at me directly. He was right about the first two parts. We worked in silence for a while, the sounds of the motor pool around us, other crews doing maintenance, the distant rumble of vehicles, the clink of tools against metal. Garrett's a good NCO, I finally said. He is, doesn't cut me any slack, doesn't expect anything less than perfection, treats me exactly like he'd treat any other gunner. She paused. But I see how some of the other guys in 3rd Platoon look at me, hear what they say when they think I'm not listening. What do they say? That I'm a distraction, that I'm a liability, that when we deploy, not if, when, I'll be the reason someone gets hurt. She tightened a bolt with more force than necessary. That the only reason I'm here is because the Army needs to hit diversity quotas. That's bullshit. Is it? You thought the same thing 6 months ago. She wasn't wrong. I was an idiot 6 months ago. You were honest 6 months ago. Now you're just polite. She climbed down from the tank, gathering her tools. I don't need polite. Marcus, I need competent crew members who trust me to do my job, and I need to be good enough that there's no question I deserve to be here. You are good enough. Not yet, not until I've proven it somewhere that actually matters. The deployment notification came in October, 12 months in Kuwait and Iraq, supporting ongoing operations, maintaining readiness in an increasingly unstable region. We had 6 weeks to prepare. Medical screenings, will preparations, family notifications, equipment checks, countless briefings about rules of engagement and cultural awareness, and what to do if taken prisoner. My father called the night I told him. Iraq, he said, and I could hear something complicated in his voice. Different war than mine was. Different world, I agreed. You trust your crew? With my life. Good. That's all that matters when it goes sideways. A pause. Your mother wants to see you before you leave. And your sister. Can you get home for a weekend? I made it home to North Carolina for 4 days. We had awkward family dinners where everyone tried not to talk about the deployment. My sister asked about Sarah. She'd seen photos from graduation, wanted to know what it was like working with other women. She's a better tanker than most of the men, I said. My father's expression was carefully neutral. Let's hope you don't have to find out what that means under fire. The week before we left, Charlie Company ran a final field exercise, 72 hours of continuous operations, simulating the kind of tempo we'd face downrange. It was brutal, moving at night, establishing defensive positions, conducting mock raids on prepared objectives, all while dealing with equipment failures and exhaustion, and the kind of friction that only happens when you're pushing systems and people to their limits. On the second night, parked in a defensive position overlooking a dry creek bed, Chen passed around an MRE pound cake he'd been saving. Last good meal before we eat sand for a year, he said. Moore, our driver, had finally fallen asleep in his seat after being awake for 36 hours. Wash was on watch. I was trying to clean the main gun, which had collected so much dust it was starting to affect the stabilization system. "You ever think about what happens if we actually have to shoot at someone?" Wash asked quietly. "Every day," Chen admitted. "That's the job, though. We train, so we can do it without thinking when the time comes." "My dad says the same thing," I said. "He was in the first Gulf War, talked about how different actual combat was from training." "How so?" "Faster, more chaotic. And you don't really process it until after. During it, you just run on training and instinct." Chen nodded. "That's why we drill until it's muscle memory. When your brain locks up from stress, your hands need to know what to do." Through the night vision system, I could see 3rd Platoon's position about 800 meters to our east. Sarah's tank was hull down behind a low ridge, perfectly positioned for overwatch. Garrett had trained that crew well. "Think we'll actually see action?" Wash asked. "Hope not," Chen said, "but we're ready if we do." The flight to Kuwait was 17 hours of cramped transport aircraft. Soldiers packed in like cargo, trying to sleep in seats designed for maximum capacity rather than comfort. We landed at Camp Buehring in the middle of the night, stumbled off the plane into heat that felt like opening an oven, and began the slow process of acclimation. The base was a sprawling temporary city in the middle of the Kuwaiti desert. Tens of thousands of soldiers, acres of equipment, the constant rhythm of convoys moving north into Iraq. We spent 2 weeks there conducting final training, zeroing weapons, adjusting to the time difference and the climate and the reality that we were now in a combat zone, even if our specific area was relatively safe. Then came the order. Charlie Company would move north to a forward operating base near the Iraq-Kuwait border, providing armored support for convoy security and rapid response operations. We rolled out before dawn, a column of M1A2 tanks and supporting vehicles moving through the desert like a mechanical migration. The landscape was alien, flat, featureless, broken only by the occasional structure or abandoned vehicle. The heat inside the tank was oppressive despite the cooling systems. "War Dog elements, this is War Dog 6. Captain Torres's voice came through the radio. "We're crossing the border in 5 minutes. Maintain spacing, stay alert. This is real now." I felt something shift inside me, a tightening in my chest, a clarity of focus I'd never experienced in training. Chen's voice was steady. "Gunner, stay on the thermal. Driver, maintain 50-meter spacing. Loader, keep the ready rounds accessible." "Roger," we all responded. The border was just a line on a map, but crossing it felt significant. We were in Iraq now, in a war zone, responsible for protecting each other and completing whatever missions came our way. What I didn't know, as we drove deeper into that alien landscape, was that 6 weeks later we'd abandon a tank in a firefight gone wrong, and 3 weeks after that, Sarah would do something that would change how I understood courage, sacrifice, and what it meant to truly trust your crew. The compound was supposed to be empty. Intelligence said the abandoned industrial facility had been clear for 6 months. Former Iraqi Army maintenance depot, stripped during the withdrawal, nothing but concrete shells and rusting equipment. We were providing security for engineers, conducting infrastructure assessment, boring work that mostly involved watching sand blow around while contractors took measurements. "War Dog 2-1, this is 6. Captain Torres's voice crackled through the radio. "I need you to move to Grid November Victor 4729. Engineers report a large structure that wasn't in the original survey. Check it out." Chen acknowledged and directed Moore to maneuver. Our tank separated from the main formation, rolling across the packed sand toward a cluster of buildings about 2 kilometers from our position. Sarah's tank, War Dog 3-2, moved with us as paired security, staying 400 meters to our right. The structure was a massive warehouse, probably built in the 80s, with corrugated metal walls and a partially collapsed roof. The kind of place that could hide anything. "Dismount and clear it," Chen ordered. "Wash, you're with me. Marcus, maintain overwatch. Moore, keep the engine running." They dropped out of the turret, rifles ready, and approached the building with tactical precision. I tracked them through the thermal sight, watching their heat signatures disappear into the dark interior. Sarah's tank had positioned at an angle that gave them clear sight lines to the opposite side. Then everything went wrong at once. The first explosion wasn't huge, an IED maybe, or an old mine that got triggered. But it was enough to blow out part of the building's wall, and suddenly I could see through the thermal sight what had been hidden inside. Heat signatures, dozens of them, moving with purpose. "Contact!" Chen's voice came through strained. "We've got armed personnel in the structure. We're taking fire." The second explosion was bigger, much bigger. Somewhere in that building was a cache of old munitions, and whatever detonated started a chain reaction. The warehouse erupted in a fireball that I could feel even from 200 meters away. "Chen, wash!" I keyed my mic. "Give me a sit rep." No response. "Wardog 2-1, this is 3-2. Sarah's voice, calm despite the chaos. "I have visual on your dismounts. They're pinned down on the northeast corner. I'm seeing multiple enemy personnel moving to flank them." My training kicked in. I traversed the main gun toward the building, but I couldn't get a clear shot without risking Chen and Wash. The thermal sight showed the enemy, insurgents probably using the chaos to attack, moving through the wreckage. 3-2, I need you to lay suppressive fire on the western wall. I'll maneuver to extract my crew. "Negative," Sarah responded. "You maneuver in there with all that burning ammo, and you'll be in the kill zone. I'll extract them. You provide overwatch." She didn't wait for my agreement. Her tank moved forward, directly toward the burning building, while I watched through my sight, feeling completely helpless. Then my radio exploded with traffic. "All War Dog elements, this is 6. We're taking indirect fire from the north, multiple mortar rounds incoming." 3-2 is disabled, Garrett's voice urgent. "We've taken a mobility kill. Track is destroyed." I slewed my turret and saw Sarah's tank sitting motionless 400 meters away, smoke rising from the damaged track assembly. Through the sight, I could see the crew starting to bail out, and the building was still burning. Chen and Wash were still pinned down. The mortars were walking across our position. I could see the impacts getting closer. Moore had the presence of mind to start backing us up, putting distance between us and the impact zone. "Marcus." Chen's voice came through weak, intermittent. "Buildings collapsing. Can't. Extraction." I made a decision that would haunt me for months. Moore, get us out of here. Fall back to the main element. What about the staff sergeant? "We can't help him if we're dead. Move!" Moore gunned the engine. We rolled backward, away from the burning warehouse, away from Chen and Wash, away from Sarah's disabled tank. The mortars kept falling. Small arms fire crackled across the compound. "All elements, emergency withdraw to Rally Point Bravo," Captain Torres ordered. "Charlie 6 is calling for gunship support. We are leaving the pocket." The next 2 hours were chaos. The entire company pulled back 3 kilometers to a defensive position while attack helicopters worked over the compound. Medevac birds came in and somehow extracted Chen and Wash, both alive but badly injured, smoke inhalation and shrapnel wounds. They were stabilized and flown to Germany within 6 hours. Sarah's crew made it out on foot. Garrett was wounded, took a piece of shrapnel to the leg, but they all survived. 3-2 was left behind. Total mobility kill, too dangerous to recover under fire, sitting in that compound like a monument to our failure. The after-action review was brutal. Captain Torres stood in front of the company, her face carved from stone, and methodically tore apart everything that went wrong. Bad intelligence, failed communication, inadequate security, individual decision-making that prioritized survival over crew integrity. She didn't say my name, but everyone knew. I'd abandoned my crew. I'd pulled back while they were still in contact. It didn't matter that Chen had ordered me out. Didn't matter that staying would have meant losing the tank and probably dying. In the tanker culture, you don't leave your people. That night, I sat alone in my tent, replaying every decision. Chen was stable, but would need months of recovery. Wash had a punctured lung and burns on his hands. They were alive, but I'd left them. Sarah found me around 200. "Stop," she said, sitting down on the crate next to my cot. "Stop what?" "The self-flagellation. You made the right call." "Did I? Because it doesn't feel right." "Chen ordered you out. The building was collapsing. You had no clear shot. Staying would have meant losing the tank and the crew." She said it with the clinical precision of someone who'd already analyzed every angle. Garrett did the same calculation when our track got blown. Sometimes the right decision feels wrong. You were moving forward, trying to extract them. And I got disabled 20 seconds later. If I'd made it another 100 meters, we'd all be dead. She leaned back against the tent pole. "This isn't training anymore, Marcus. Out here, you can do everything right and still lose. The question is whether you learn from it or whether you let it paralyze you." "How's Garrett?" "Pissed off about getting wounded, more pissed off about losing his tank." She smiled slightly. "He's already planning the recovery operation." "You can't recover 3-2. It's in a hostile compound. We can't leave an M1A2 sitting in enemy territory. You know how much sensitive equipment is in that thing? The thermal sights alone are classified. The targeting computers, the armor composition, the network systems. We literally cannot allow that to fall into enemy hands or get stripped by insurgents." "So what? We're going back." "Eventually, when the situation's stable enough." She stood. "But until then, I've got no tank and you've got no crew, so I'm getting reassigned to War Dog 2-1 as acting commander until Chen returns. You're stuck with me." I looked up at her. "Torres approved that?" "She recommended it. Said you need someone who won't let you wallow in guilt, and I need someone who can shoot straight." She headed toward the tent flap, then paused. "Get some sleep. We've got convoy escort at 600. Over the next 3 weeks, Sarah and I developed the kind of crew cohesion that usually takes months. She was demanding, constantly drilling me on engagement sequences, testing my reaction time, pushing me to maintain focus despite the guilt eating at me. But she was also fair, and she trusted me to do my job. Moore and our new loader, Specialist Jackson, transferred from 4th Platoon, adapted quickly. We ran convoy security, checkpoint support, rapid response standby. The work was monotonous, punctuated by moments of terror, potential IEDs, suspicious vehicles, one incident where we had to put rounds into a car that wouldn't stop at a checkpoint. Sarah made the call. Clean, decisive, necessary. The car stopped. "Good shot," she said calmly, already moving to the next task. I'd expected working under her command to be awkward or to highlight all my failures. Instead, it was the opposite. She was a better commander than Chen, not because Chen was bad, but because she thought 3 steps ahead, communicated with absolute clarity, and had the kind of calm under pressure that made everyone else calmer. "Why'd you join?" I asked one night when we were on guard duty, parked in a defensive position watching an empty highway. "Why does anyone join?" She scanned the horizon through the thermal sight. "Wanted to prove something, to myself mostly, to my dad, to everyone who said I couldn't." "You've proven it." "Not yet." She adjusted a setting. "Not until we finish this deployment. Not until I get my own tank back." 3-2? "Yeah, I know it's just a machine, but it's my machine, my crew's machine. Garrett's got 15 years in armor. That was supposed to be his last deployment before retirement. Losing that tank." She stopped, and I heard something vulnerable in her voice. "We're getting it back, Marcus. Somehow." The order came through on a Thursday. Engineering assessment indicated the compound was structurally safe. Air reconnaissance showed no enemy activity in 2 weeks. We were going back to recover 3-2. The brief was clinical. 4th Platoon would provide security cordon. Maintenance team would conduct field repairs to restore mobility. Estimated time on target, 6 hours. Rules of engagement, weapons tight unless fired upon. "What are the chances the tank's even functional?" someone asked. The maintenance sergeant shrugged. "Depends on what they did to it. If it's just the track, we can fix it. If they strip the systems or sabotage the engine, we'll have to tow it." Captain Torres looked directly at Sarah. "Reeves, you'll direct the recovery. Nobody knows that tank better than you." The convoy rolled out before dawn. Our tank, 2 others from 4th Platoon, maintenance vehicles, security element. The same desert landscape, but now it felt different, heavier with memory. The compound looked apocalyptic in daylight. The warehouse was a burned-out skeleton. Debris scattered across hundreds of meters, and sitting in the middle of it all, covered in dust but basically intact, was 3-2. Sarah was out of our tank before we'd even fully stopped, walking toward her disabled vehicle with something between grief and determination. I watched through the sight as she climbed up, disappearing into the commander's hatch. 2 minutes later, her voice came through the radio. "The main systems are intact. They didn't touch anything critical. We can fix this." The maintenance team swarmed the tank. Sarah directed them with absolute precision, where to weld, what to replace, how to jury-rig the track assembly with parts we'd brought. I maintained overwatch, scanning for threats, trying not to think about Chen and Wash bleeding in this same dirt 3 weeks ago. 4 hours in, one of the maintenance specialists emerged from the engine compartment shaking his head. "Fuel systems contaminated. Somebody poured something into the tank. Sand, maybe, or worse. We try to start this engine and we'll destroy it." Sarah climbed down, examining the problem herself. I could see her mind working, calculating options. "Can we tow it?" she asked. "In this terrain. We'd need a recovery vehicle, and the nearest one is 8 hours away." "So, what are you saying?" The specialist looked uncomfortable. "I'm saying maybe we cut our losses, extract the sensitive equipment and destroy the hull. We've already been here too long." Sarah's expression went cold. "No. Sergeant, be reasonable." "I said no. This tank is recoverable and we're going to recover it." She keyed her radio. "Captain Torres, this is Reeves. I need to propose an alternative recovery method." What she proposed was insane. She wanted to completely drain the fuel system, manually clean it, refill it with fresh fuel, and attempt a field start. It would take 6 more hours minimum. It violated every protocol about time on target in hostile territory. And if it didn't work, we'd have wasted the entire day for nothing. Torres was silent for a long moment. "How confident are you?" she finally asked. 70%, ma'am. 70% isn't certainty, Sergeant. Neither is destroying an operational tank worth $8 million because we're too impatient to fix it properly. Another pause. "You have 4 hours. If it's not running by then, we pull the systems and slag the hull. Understood?" "Understood." Sarah turned to the maintenance team. "You heard her. Let's get to work." What followed was the most intense display of mechanical competence I'd ever witnessed. Sarah didn't just direct the work, she did it herself, getting inside the fuel system, manually flushing every line, checking every connection. She had grease up to her elbows, sweat pouring down her face in the brutal heat, completely focused on the problem in front of her. 3 hours and 40 minutes after they started, she climbed into the driver's seat. "Marcus, you monitoring this?" she asked over the radio. "I've got you. If this works, and we need to fight our way out, I need you ready." "I'm ready." She hit the ignition. The M1A2's turbine engine has a distinctive sound, a high-pitched whine that builds to a roar. I'd heard it thousands of times in training, hundreds of times in deployment. But I'd never heard anything as beautiful as that engine turning over, catching, stabilizing into a steady rhythm. 3-2 was alive. The maintenance team erupted in cheers. Sarah's voice came through the radio. Professional, but with an edge of triumph. All war dog elements. 3-2 is mobile. Recommend we exfiltrate before we tempt fate any further. The convoy back to base felt like a victory parade. Sarah drove her tank personally, refusing to let anyone else take the controls. When we rolled through the gate, half the company was waiting. Garrett was there too, on crutches, grinning widely. "I knew you'd get her back," he said when Sarah climbed down. "Your tank, Sergeant," she replied. "I was just borrowing it." That night, there was an impromptu celebration in the company area. Nothing official, just soldiers who'd witnessed something exceptional and wanted to acknowledge it. I found Sarah sitting alone near the motor pool, looking at 3-2 like it might disappear if she looked away. "Hell of a thing you did today," I said. "Did what needed doing." "No, you went above and beyond. You risked the entire recovery operation because you refused to give up on something worth saving." She looked at me then, and I saw exhaustion and pride and something else, maybe the same thing I was feeling: respect, trust, the knowledge that we'd both been tested in different ways, and neither of us had broken. "I learned something these past 3 weeks," she said quietly. "Being a commander isn't about being perfect. It's about making the hard calls and living with the consequences. You made the right call when you pulled back. I would have done the same thing. You were moving forward. I was 24 and trying to prove I was brave. There's a difference between courage and stupidity. Took me getting disabled to figure that out." She stood, brushing sand off her uniform. "Chen and Wash are alive because you followed orders and didn't throw your life away in a heroic gesture. That's leadership. So is bringing a dead tank back to life because you refused to quit." She smiled, really smiled. Maybe the first time I'd seen it. Guess we both learned something then. We stood there in the desert night, 2 soldiers who'd started as skeptics and become something like friends, maybe even family. The deployment had 4 months left. Plenty of time for more missions, more conflicts, more tests. But standing there beside that resurrected tank, I knew something had fundamentally changed, not just in how I saw Sarah, but in how I saw what it meant to be a good soldier. It wasn't about physical strength or gender or meeting some arbitrary standard. It was about refusing to quit when everything logical said to give up. It was about competence under pressure. It was about trusting your crew and being worthy of their trust in return. And Sarah Reeves embodied all of that. We rotated home in March, 12 months after we'd deployed, carrying experiences that would take years to fully process. The flight back was quieter than the flight out. Everyone exhausted, changed, marked by things we couldn't quite articulate to people who hadn't been there. Chen and Wash were waiting at Fort Hood when we returned. Chen was thinner, moving carefully, but his sardonic grin was intact. Wash still had bandages on his hands, but was cleared for duty. Seeing them alive, functional, erased some of the guilt I'd been carrying. "Heard you didn't completely fuck up my tank," Chen said, gripping my shoulder. "Reeves kept it running." "Yeah, I heard about that too. Heard she brought 3-2 back from the dead." He looked across the hangar to where Sarah was reuniting with 3rd Platoon. "She's good. You're lucky you got to learn from her." The words felt significant, from him. This was a man with 12 years in armor, 3 combat deployments, who'd come up in an army where women in combat roles were literally illegal. And he was saying, "I was lucky to learn from Sarah." Maybe the world really was changing. The post-deployment phase was strange. Weeks of medical screenings, administrative processing, mandatory counseling sessions. Trying to readjust to a world where the most dangerous thing you faced was traffic on Interstate 35. Some guys went hard into drinking or partying. Others went quiet, withdrawing into themselves. I fell somewhere in the middle, trying to figure out what normal was supposed to feel like now. Sarah seemed to handle it better than most. She threw herself into maintenance, working on 3-2 like it was her personal project, ensuring every system was perfect. Garrett had been medically retired. His leg injury was severe enough to end his career, and Sarah had been selected to take his place as tank commander. They offered me a promotion track, she told me one afternoon while we were both working in the motor pool. Armor officer candidate school. Said I'd make a good platoon leader. That's huge. You taking it? I don't know. She adjusted a hydraulic line. Part of me wants to, but part of me thinks I'm more useful right here in the crew, doing the job I trained for. You'd be good at it. Leading? Maybe. But I proved what I needed to prove. I don't need bars on my collar to validate that. Before I could respond, my phone rang. My father. We'd been talking more since I got back. Careful, measured conversations where we were both trying to find new ground. Can I call you back? I answered. I'm working on... I need to tell you something, he interrupted, and his tone made me stop. Your grandfather died this morning. Heart attack. It was quick. The world tilted slightly. Granddad, the tank commander in Korea, the man whose stories had shaped my entire understanding of what it meant to serve. When's the funeral? Saturday in Fayetteville. I know you just got back, but I'll be there. I hung up and just stood there, wrench in hand, trying to process. Sarah looked over. You okay? My grandfather died. I'm sorry. She set down her tools. The one who was a tanker? Yeah. Then you need to go. Take whatever time you need. The funeral was military, full honors, flag-draped coffin, 21-gun salute. The kind of ceremony that makes you understand the weight of tradition. 3 generations of our family had served. My father, my grandfather, me, all tankers. At the reception after, my father pulled me aside. He was proud of you, he said. Talked about you constantly. The deployment, the recovery operation, everything. How did he know about the recovery? I told him about the tank you helped bring back, about the sergeant who commanded it. He paused. I also told him what I'd said to you, about women in armor, about different standards. I waited. He told me I was an idiot. My father smiled slightly. Said the whole point of service is that it changes, adapts, gets better. That if we were still using the same tactics and equipment and personnel policies we used in Korea, we'd have lost every war since. He said the question isn't whether someone fits your preconceived notion of what a soldier should be. The question is whether they can do the job. Sounds like him. I was wrong, Marcus. About Sergeant Reeves. About all of it. He looked at me directly. You trust her with your life? Without hesitation. Then that's all that matters. I returned to Fort Hood with a sense of closure I hadn't expected. My grandfather's death was sad, but it had also given me permission to fully embrace the evolution I'd been experiencing. I wasn't betraying tradition by respecting Sarah's competence. I was honoring the best parts of that tradition: excellence, courage, adaptability. 2 weeks later, the company got orders for a new training rotation, National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California. 2 weeks of intensive field exercises in a massive simulated battlefield, the closest thing to real combat the Army could create in peacetime. Sarah's crew, 3-2, was designated as one of the evaluation vehicles. They'd be running complex scenarios against an opposing force designed to replicate near-peer threats, everything monitored and graded. I was assigned to support crew for War Dog 2-1, but Chen encouraged me to spend time with 3rd Platoon, learning from how Sarah ran her operations. NTC was brutal, the Mojave Desert in summer, temperatures over 110 degrees, scenarios that ran 20 hours straight, observer controllers critiquing every decision. Sarah's crew performed brilliantly: smooth communication, fast target engagement, tactical positioning that maximized their advantages. On the 5th day, they ran a scenario that mirrored elements of our deployment: recovery operation in hostile territory, degraded equipment, limited time on target. I watched from the command post as Sarah made her decisions. When the enemy force appeared, she didn't panic. When the simulated track failure occurred, she immediately began coordinating repair. When time pressure mounted, she held her ground, insisting the recovery could be completed, and it was. The observer controllers rated it as one of the best individual crew performances of the entire rotation. That night, the company gathered for an informal after-action review. Captain Torres stood in front of us, looking tired but satisfied. "We came here to prove we could maintain readiness after a combat deployment," she said. "You've done that. But more importantly, you've shown that this company is built on trust, competence, and the willingness to adapt." She looked at Sarah. "Sergeant Reeves, your crew's performance this week has been exceptional. You've set a standard that I expect the rest of this company to meet." Applause rippled through the group. Sarah looked uncomfortable with the attention, but there was pride there too. After the gathering broke up, I found her sitting alone on a berm overlooking the desert, watching the sunset in brilliant oranges and purples. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just thinking." About? About how far we've come, both of us." She glanced at me. "You laughed at me during training, remember?" I remember. I was so angry, not because it hurt my feelings, I'd dealt with worse, but because I knew that laugh represented all the assumptions I'd have to overcome, that I was weak or a diversity hire or couldn't handle the job. I was wrong. You were. But you changed your mind. You actually saw me, learned from me, trusted me. That's rarer than you think." She picked up a handful of sand, letting it run through her fingers. "Most people don't change. They just get better at hiding their bias." "What made you keep going, when everyone was doubting you?" "My dad used to say that the only opinion that matters is your own. Everyone else is just noise." She smiled. "Also, I was too stubborn to quit. I spent 6 months preparing for armor school specifically, so I couldn't be dismissed as unprepared. I worked twice as hard because I had to. And every time someone like you, no offense, assumed I couldn't do it, I used that as fuel. None taken. I deserved that." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the desert night settle around us. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of the base, vehicles moving, generators humming, the quiet conversations of soldiers. "I'm staying in," Sarah said abruptly, "turning down the OCS slot. I want to stay with my crew, keep doing this job." "That's the right call, for you. What about you? You re-enlisting?" I hadn't really thought about it. My initial contract was up in 18 months. I could get out, go to college on the GI Bill, find some civilian job that didn't involve 110-degree heat and the constant threat of violence. But sitting there, thinking about everything we'd been through, the mistakes and the growth and the bonds formed in shared difficulty, I realized I wasn't ready to leave. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." "Good. Because you're a decent gunner when you're not overthinking things." I laughed. "High praise." "It's honest praise. That's better." 3 months later, I stood in formation as Sarah received the Army Commendation Medal for her actions during the tank recovery operation. The citation read in part, "Sergeant Reeves displayed exceptional leadership, technical expertise, and devotion to duty under extremely hazardous conditions. Her decisive actions resulted in the successful recovery of critical equipment and upheld the highest traditions of the United States Army." My father had flown out for the ceremony. Afterward, he asked to meet her. "Sir," Sarah said, shaking his hand, "your son speaks highly of you." "He speaks highly of you, Sergeant. And based on what I've heard, that respect is well earned." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I served with some outstanding soldiers in my career. Not all of them looked like me or thought like me. The best ones challenged my assumptions and made me better. Thank you for doing that for my son." Sarah's expression softened. "He made that easy, sir. He was willing to learn." After my father left, I walked with Sarah back toward the company area. "That meant something," she said. Him saying that. Yeah, your grandfather would have liked him saying it too. He would have liked you, I said. Stubborn, competent, refusing to quit. That was his whole philosophy. We stopped at the motor pool where 3-2 sat gleaming in the afternoon sun. Sarah ran her hand along the armor plating, the same gesture I'd seen dozens of times. You know what the best part is? She asked. What? It's not the medal or the recognition. It's knowing that somewhere, some young woman is thinking about joining the military, and she's seeing that it's possible, that she can do this job, that she doesn't have to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. She just has to be good and work hard and refuse to quit when people doubt her. You're a role model now. God, I hope not. I'm just a tanker who got lucky and had good people around her. She looked at me. People like you. I learned more from you than you learned from me. We learned from each other. That's how it's supposed to work. 5 years later, I was finishing my officer training at Fort Benning when I got a message from Sarah. She'd been promoted to Sergeant First Class, was commanding a platoon, and had been selected to attend the Armor Captain's Career Course, the pathway to senior leadership. Guess I'm doing the officer thing after all, her message read. Apparently, someone thought I'd be good at it. Can't imagine who recommended me. I smiled, remembering our conversation in the desert. She'd said she was staying enlisted, staying with her crew. But the Army has a way of finding people who can lead and pushing them toward it, whether they planned for it or not. My response was simple. You'll be an outstanding officer. Just don't forget those of us who knew you when you were just a sergeant. Her reply came immediately. Impossible. Some lessons you never forget. I thought about that first day at Fort Huachuca, face down in the Arizona dirt, laughing at someone I'd assumed couldn't handle the job. I thought about the deployment, the recovery operation, the countless moments where Sarah had proven not just her competence, but her excellence. But mostly I thought about the gift she'd given me, the chance to be wrong, to learn, to become better than I was. In a weird way, laughing at her during training was the best mistake I ever made, because it started a journey that changed everything I thought I knew about strength, leadership, and what it means to truly respect the people you serve with. The tank we abandoned became a symbol, not of failure but of redemption, of refusing to give up on something worth saving, of understanding that sometimes the right decision isn't the easy one, and sometimes the people you underestimate are exactly the ones who'll teach you the most important lessons. Sarah Reeves revived more than just a war machine that day in the Iraqi desert. She revived something in me, a belief that growth is always possible, that assumptions can be challenged, and that the best crews are built not on similarity, but on mutual respect, earned through shared trials and the willingness to see each other as we truly are, not as stereotypes or statistics or political talking points, just as soldiers doing the job together.